Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have two terrific poets, David Oliveira, who lives in Cambodia, and Jamie O'Halloran, who lives in Ireland. David will read first, and then Jamie. David Oliveira is the author of 3 poetry collections, A Little Travel Story, Harbor Mountain Press, As Everyone Goes, Treehouse Press, and Still Life with Coffee, Brandenburg Press. He co-edited the seminal anthology, How Much Earth, the Fresno Poets, Heyday Books with Christopher Buckley and M.L. Williams. He co-founded Mille Graze Press in Santa Barbara with Cynthia Anderson, co-edited Solo, a journal of poetry with Glenna Luche and Jackson Wheeler, and founded the Santa Barbara Poetry Series hosted by Phil Taggart. He lives and writes on the banks of the Mekong River near Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Here's a superlative poet, David Oliveira.
Thank you very much, Harry. I'm very happy to be here. And hello, Jamie. It's really quite a pleasure to be reading with you. I'd like to begin by reading a poem by Amy Uematsu called Dreaming of Fire on the Night It Rained. I am in a house owned by strangers with white skin. I do not like it here, but no, I cannot leave. Fires are burning throughout the city. Though new fires break out randomly, the timing between each new outburst is almost rhythmic. Everyone waits in expectation of the next one. The flames get closer to this old frame house. I am only 9 or 10, but try to convince the white man who owns the house that it needs to be hosed down with water. He ignores me. So I search outside and find a short hose. The water pressure is low, but I manage to get a small stream, which I aim toward the roof and to the building sides. Some parts of the wooden structure are so weak, they break under the slightest pressure of the water. The white strangers in the house frighten me, but I know my fate is tied to them. I must keep watering the dry wood. For now, it is all I can do. That's Amy Uematsu, a wonderful poet. Mm-hmm. She's from Los Angeles. And I wanted to, my reading is not very many poems, but some are a little bit long. I wanted to, there's some old, some new, some borrowed, and some blue. And in fact, they're all borrowed. This one is my Los Angeles poem, my Hollywood poem. It's I thought I would read it in honor of the place where this reading takes place, and I wanted to dedicate it to a young friend of mine named Emma, who is very precocious and likes this poem. It's called Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. He is 41, his mother 28. Already blonder than Denmark, there isn't enough dye left in the bottle to turn him into a schoolboy. Sweet prince of the theater before the movies, he has a taste for lace cuffs and intricate embroidery, but dons simple tights in every scene, fittingly black for mourning a father. It's the classic story. The father, too preoccupied with work to notice that his bored wife is occupied by his younger brother. Indifferent to the family business, the overprotected son parties away at college, perennially shy of graduation credits. When his father dies unexpectedly, the son, victim of chronic vacillation, he has yet to figure out what his major is going to be or not to be. Can't decide how best to get home, missing father's funeral, mother's wedding, and the coveted crown. He's first runner-up. Not the only son to ever face the ghost of a father, he doesn't handle the situation well, wanting nothing more than to curl up on mother's busy bed. Prim enough for the stage, the plot sheds 2 hours to fit into the movies. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are gone before they can be killed, something everyone regrets. Olivier and Alan Dent share writing credit. Mentioned is the aspiring author of the effusive first draft, unavailable for the rewrite. For Sir Larry, who directs himself, it's all black and white, just the simple tragedy of a man who couldn't make up his mind. Snow and the Academy Awards fall on the first day of spring in LA, 1949. Gowns under wraps, actresses and heels slip through Hollywood's icy streets more easily than usual. The great Ethel B., who has been in all the papers for weeks, touting Brother John's Greater Dane, presents the award for Best Picture, the winner's name trippingly on the tongue. The writing, which some find derivative and cliched, isn't nominated. In London to do a play with wife Vivian, Olivier celebrates with an extra drink after the show, as do the losers. This night he has a bit of trouble falling asleep. His head reels in words, sublime, unforgettable words. This poem is the title poem of my second book. I'll just hold it up for historic purposes. It's a poem I wrote after a small drought of not writing for a while. And in the past, when I have those droughts, when I do start to write again, the poems tend to be a little bit long. I tend to try to load them down with everything I've been thinking. And that was just fair warning. As everyone goes, I will die soon. I don't have specific news on this. I don't know a day or month. I don't know the year, though all have relocated closer. I am an age I thought impossible the first time I became a man, when thought was unsullied by thinking and youth could be sure of nearly everything. Now thoughts arrive humble and cautious, weighed down by an old man unsure of anything. A lot of people I've known are dead already. The ones remembered over steaming coffee or the wan autumn light wrapped around country bread and Cabernet are those I wish had stayed. Some I've wished death on are gone too, for which I hesitate to take all the credit, as everyone goes, with or without wishes. Imagine I stand on the edge of a precise universe which expands beyond understanding, a place hardly moved from the valley where everything begins, where I meet the best people I've ever known, the best people that could be known, who still elude the world's attention despite their ordeal being no less epic than the thin flicker of those faraway flames crossing eternities to spill over the stutter that fills their names. Imagine that afternoon bends toward evening behind the backs of two aging men, arguing not over redoing the queen's last move in a game of chess, the dispute that sends them home the night before. They argue about a single word that falls between two other words on a piece of paper, a word that explains an evil so artful it whispers the sweet song of angels into the wind to steal the air. Their every syllable cut to silence, unable to breathe. Imagine this is the kind of day which even excuses fall short to explain. Though it is true, short excuses often bring serenity, especially late at night when air cools and calm descends around lamplight, making circles on these pages of lies like coffee stains. And the sharp point of a pencil finds its purpose in shaping words that spill fire over my thoughts, infinitely more beautiful and perceptive than these my ignorant fingers botch across the paper. Imagine you have just read a poem, not a poem that disappears easily into 100 others, but a really great poem with words so clear, so obvious, they fall into line, into patterns of breath, into the only way breathing can be explained. And you wonder how anyone, how everyone, how you failed to put these simple words this way before. How suddenly everything you have ever written becomes a waste of time. Everything cannot happen today, so not everything will. Perhaps this is not the day I die. This is not the day I become a perfect human being. Failure always seems an easy fit and close. To say I've had my share is conceit and inaccurate. What I've had, what has come to me, as barely audible sighs in the brazen glare of daylight and muted exhales slipping under the shyness of each night, is nothing more than what follows the ordinary on the planet of my birth. It is not hard to sustain this level of imperfection. One hardly has to try. I stand under stars existing outside time, rushing from every place to who knows where. They have something to do with me. I stand on the years it takes to make this story, rushing from its first word to wherever the last one goes. Nothing that tells a story waits for the end in the same place the story begins. I take these dramatic pauses to signal that that's the end of the poem and another one is coming up. This one is just called Time. And I've had a difficult time getting other people to like it, but I like it. Webster's Collegiate Dictionary calls time the measured or unmeasurable period during which an action, process, or condition exists or continues. I'm not sure if they got it right, since I don't really understand what that says, nor know enough myself to make my own meaning. I prefer stubbornly persistent illusion. That was Einstein's thought, sent to Bezos' family on his best friend's death. I still defer to Einstein, though I don't, in fact, grasp his words any better. Digging a hole in the garden, I discover an ancient hammerhead covered in rust and clay. There's no clue who lost it there, nor how long ago, nor how many stories are encrusted in it. I hold time in my hands. My fingernail scrapes off a small flake of rust. A decade falls to the ground. I'm sure these past 10 years I didn't do enough. How much of my time am I given to squander? The question falls meaningless. We do what we do, and then we get on with it, whatever it is. Time makes me possible and unmakes me as well. It feels strange to realize I'll go out of life without knowing any more than when I came in. Not the first person to face this predicament. Bookshelves are lined with stories of time's fleet traffic, but Shakespeare puts it best. What is past is prologue. I've seen enough of my past to see my future. Details are vague, but the destination's certain. I'm comforted that illusions are still something. Rainbows beautiful, though no arc hangs in the sky. This is a poem I wrote about my husband, Vic, who died 4 years ago today, exactly. Today is the 8th here already, February 8th. It's called Mint Garden. I wasn't cut out to be a farmer as much as I've tried, even within the small confines of a terrace. I was born without necessary instincts, nor capacity to learn from repetitive mistakes. Garden books explain mint as nearly impossible to kill. Nearly, however, allows some room for the ardent kisses of my fatal attachment. Few would recognize it as a garden, I admit, though that is the word I give it, a collection of cement pots planted with varieties of mint set across the edge of a small terrace. If few see a garden, fewer see reasons for attachment, least of all those fate cuffs together. Reasons get made up, rationales to decorate desires, irrational passions. Various tubes and wires connect him to the hospital. The doctors concoct countless rules to keep people out. Day by day, he doesn't get better, let alone well. He lies uncomplaining. The sick submit to their impotence. On the way to the hospital, the ambulance sang its siren song. What's happening? What's wrong? Worthless questions, as the answers are all lies. The triage room rings out with desperate howls of chaos. The treatment room whispers hymns of hope from one bed, while the other bed immerses in sighs that attend a persistent parade of resignation and despair. After several days, another ambulance readies to take him home. Quietly this time, to surround him with family and neighbors, the music of familiar voices and bright talk. That's all lies too. Mint doesn't grow without effort, despite the reputation. It requires constant attention, balances of water, sun, and soil, continually pruning and replanting, vigilance against invaders, a word or two of love now and then to ease the stress of work. It takes a long time to realize mistakes, longer to appreciate them. The essence of mint requires gentle patience to maintain, and neither realization nor appreciation is immunity against the next time. Water at hand, I tend to the plants every morning, keeping alert for changes in the mint's well-being and my fitness to steward them. The sweet bouquet of mint fans over the terrace, and all thoughts of hardship float away. I do my best, which doesn't mean I do the right things or the sensible things or even know what those things would be. I do my best. In a righteous world, he would have survived me.
That's really lovely.
So this poem is called The Protestant Cemetery in Rome, after Larry Levis. It needs, there's a cast of characters and it needs a little explanation. Jade is a word that will appear near the end. And we call them, in English, we call them stupas. And they're kind of like memorial shrines where the ashes of the dead are kept. The poem that I borrowed the inspiration from, you notice I said borrowed rather than stole, but semantics, is called Those Graves in Rome. And it's a poem I loved for a long time. It's about Larry Levis being in Rome at the same time, by coincidence, that Phil Levine and his wife, Franny, were there. And they met and they did some things together. That's what the poem is. And the graves, those graves in Rome, he's referring to the grave of Keats, who was buried there. He died in Rome, next to the Spanish Steps, a room he kept. And Shelley, Percy Shelley, he died a year later after Keats in a boating accident. He drowned. And he's buried in a different place in the cemetery against the wall. Keats has a corner to himself, almost to himself. Joseph Severn was an artist, and he was a good friend of Keats, and he helped nurse him in his last days. And although he died many years after Keats, he has the plot next to him. Also, Severn's young son, who died quite young, is buried behind them both. Weinberg refers to John Weinberg. He was a really wonderful Fresno poet. Buckley refers to Christopher Buckley, my good friend. Nadia is Chris's wife, Nadia Brown. She is an artist. In fact, let me hold up my new book, which I'm very proud of. She painted the watercolor that's on the cover, and it's a watercolor of my garden, the end of my garden where it faces the river. And I mentioned Vic in this poem as well. This was another poem I wrote after a small period of writing drought. The Protestant Cemetery in Rome, after Larry Levis. I follow Levine, Franny, and Levis down a winding path in the non-Catholic cemetery for foreigners in Rome to find the grave of the young English poet whose name, at his direction, was writ in water. It is also writ on the tombstone to the right, belonging to Joseph Severn, whose eye for composition bought both plots as Keats lay in his small room against the Spanish Steps and against the odds. Buckley, Nadia, and Weinberg also come along this same gravel path, and for the same reason. We stand all together in front of the graves without speaking, as speaking might confirm we have come this long way with nothing necessary to say. For uncounted seconds, we stare instead at what cannot be found here. Such is the risk of an educated life. This is the story I bring to tell Vic as we stand with the others as planned. The names are meaningless to him, though he listens faithfully and feels the honor. The moment remains inconsequential, as most do. No words looking for lines in a poem. In truth, on this rainy Sunday morning, I come here alone. Levis and Levine and Weinberg are gone. Franny is in Fresno. Buckley and Nadia in Santa Barbara. Vic too is gone. And I, going, stand here for everyone. The cemetery isn't what I imagined. Old cypresses and pines stretch their wet length cloudward. Shaved grasses roll toward thousands of spring flowers in one part, and clean, narrow paths navigate thousands of crowded names on the other. Far from the neglected old stones and prospering weeds, I expect. This is not a sad place, and no one comes here to cry. Just weeks ago, I met Chris and Nadia for dinner in Paris. We travel from different worlds for different purposes, but friendship brings us together for some of the same hours. Like old people, for we are old, conversation turns to remembrance. Remembrance means a recitation of names, some revered, some not, some barely thought of. And the recognition that we too have names, finding a chair around the wine and bread of evening suppers. Like young people, for we are almost young, we hint at plans, the expectation of another slipping dusk, another meal, and we embrace this quiet good night without doubts. Certainty becomes a luxury beyond my means. Years ago, Vic, quite well then and excited, leads me among the many Jody, holding urns that hold the ashes of the dead, which surround the modest grounds of our village pagoda, to a small piece of land between two stupas, bare except for wild grasses thriving in the hard gray clay, and announces this space is ours, a rare gift of the head monk to the living against the day of dying. That day does come, and who knows what it means, or even if it has meaning. We do know another Jedi rises. We know visitors stop for a while, and in a while stop visiting. We know eventually only strangers happen this way, turning right instead of left, for instance, not discovering their heir until seeing the name on a stone. And even then, not seeing the kindness or caring or generosity that shape the letters, or how the touch of their sounds, when spoken together, become unbearable in its exquisiteness through the living air. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for your empathetic and poignant poems, your meditation on death, your poems of love and death. They're very touching, and I appreciate them very much. Robert Graves once said that the two subject matters of poetry are, number one, love and death, and number two, the triple-headed goddess. And so thank you very much for that extraordinary reading. And our next poet is Jamie O'Halloran. American-Irish poet Jamie O'Halloran is the author of the 4 chapbooks, including Corona, Connemara, and Half a Crown, a winner in the 2021 Fool for Poetry competition. He has published widely in Irish, UK, and US magazines, including Poetry Ireland Review, 14 Magazine, One Hand Clapping, and The Night Heron Barks. Her poems appear in a dozen anthologies, Romance Options and Local Wonders from Daedalus Press, Ground Passion, Poets of Los Angeles and Beyond. She was 2021 Artist in Residence at Bridget's Garden in County Galway and is a recipient of an Arts Council of Ireland Agility Award. She lives in Connemara in the west of Ireland above a river with her husband, 2 donkeys and 1 cat. Here's an outstanding poet, Jamie O'Halloran.
Thank you so much, Harry, for the invitation. It's a repeat invitation, which is a triple honor. And to be reading with David is such a gift. It was really beautiful and moving to hear you, David. And because this is with David, I'm going to start with reading some excerpts from a poem that goes back a while. And I read it at a reading, and David and Jackson Wheeler asked me for it for Solo Magazine. This is called the Murrietta / the Lunar Seas. So these are about the seas of the moon that we, can be seen from this side of the moon, from the Earth side. And there are quite a few of them. So I'm just going to read a few. And there is an epigraph, it's a little quotation to kind of set the tone for the poem. It's from Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock. Since all things lost on earth are treasured there. And I'll just go into reading a few of these. Mare Crisium, Sea of Crises. Separate as hen's teeth in their sleep, I'm not coming home. In the glass lobby, she is another woman. That out of the way. She addresses herself to what will microwave, what to watch on late TV, and adjusts the air with every dream, each kick of thin duvet, the dusty blue spread. She wakes to her tongue worrying the cavity of sleep. Mare Frigoris, Sea of Cold. Wan, glowing like star jasmine and just as stiff, among leaves dark as space. Spittle of rock glazes the cold sea's beach, tide no more than a shiver, waves like the bloom of breath when the world welcomes you less than your blood. Mare Imbrium, Sea of Rains. Heavy rain is measured in inches, not pounds, puts a shine to every dull thing. Rust-damp bark of the pear tree. Jessamines, deflated yellow trumpets heaped along the fence. 3 days of rain are nothing like 40, but the rain is longer when counted in hours. This is a flood of clocks, not calendars. 16 colorless hours are wetter than a day, not singular, pouring in numbers like rabbits, like buckets, like salt. And I'll read just one more of these. Mare Serenitatis, Sea of Serenity. Because it is far and beguiles, like the crooked horizon climbing the sky, garnished in the movies by a conga line of happy wanderers. Valderie, Valdera. Okay, and I'm going to move to another group of poems. And these poems I wrote, this is from, Harry mentioned, Corona, Connemara, and Half a Crown, my chapbook from last year, just about almost a year ago. And I wrote these during January of 2021. I was participating in a kind of a fundraiser for the Tupelo Press called 3030, where 30 poets were writing 30 poems in 30 days. And it was when here in Ireland, we were in another lockdown. And it was my first January living in Ireland. So I was getting used to the place, the season. there was the corona on Mars, there were other things, the virus and other things going on. And the corona refers to, this is a crown, a sonnet crown that has a series of poems, sonnets, and so the second poem begins with the final line of the preceding poem, and it goes on that way for 14 poems, so that the 14th poem ends on the first line of the first poem, and then there's sort of a class of the 15th poem where all the lines that are used, the repeating lines, make up the final poem. I won't read all of it, I'm gonna read some of them, and also because, when this was new, Harry had invited me to earn his poetry hour, and so I read these, and I think he was fond of them, so I want to read some again. The collection has an epigraph again, another quotation to kind of set the tone. And this is from Marilyn Robinson from her brilliant novel, Leela. What use was there in calling a day by a certain name, or thinking of it as anything other than weather? These poems are numbered, so I'm going to read the number. They're not titled. Corona Connemara. 1. If it weren't for the cold, the short days, one might not guess it is winter. All seems green, hedges and fields, even the leafless limbs of beech wear green lichen gloves. Spears of crocus and narcissus poke through unfrozen soil. Each morning, as the sunrise creeps back, I check for the latest risen congregation of stiff foliage where blossoms will open like choristers, closing in on my first full round of seasons in this new place. I still learn what grows, when and where. Blankets of alder leaves feed the meadow. Wild carrot will tail hyacinth and bluebells. This year of grief isn't ending, but brightening. 2. This year of grief isn't ending, but brightening, with its earlier sun and later moon. We drove to the bends last evening. The sight of them sifted with the morning snow, the last we'd catch until this next lockdown is lifted. We'll trace our local loop, learning the hedge by heart. We caught the best a day could bring, with a shower ending as the sun was settling deep into Connemara, a rainbow arched across the all of Mound Valley Bog. Holiday closures will stay this month, tight as a bud, while the snowdrops ring their shy white bells. By February, March, we may get the jab. If nothing else, sons of Narcissus will nod, cradling the lights we lost. And I'm going to pop over to 5. It makes us pause, glance to see what is behind the whoosh in the road that might be wind or another engine. Pause then to quick step away and clear out of the road or marvel at a branch's nod. It is the same as the last walk or tomorrow's. Night, evening, morning, our measures of light marking weather and seasons. Yesterday was wet day. Today, soft day. A gray one when the lake is the unwooded patch along the horizon seeping into the sky. The earth shows its unhurried turn in the ivy, winter heavy, clustered with berries. Wild marjoram has died back. Heuchera is a constellation of rust. Narcissus pokes up, finding nowhere to reflect underground. Come March, see it bloom by the river, head pendant, yellow crown. During this time, there was a lot of news going on here in Ireland about the findings and reports on the tragedy of the mother and baby homes, where women who were unmarried were sent, and often their children taken away from them, and many of the children died, the infants. This is number 9. And so we paved our road, our failings, the hell we make. 9,000 names stretch into a ribbon of mourning, Sisters of Mercy. Blinds are raised and shutters opened in a different custom of respect. The best disinfectant, they say, is sunshine, daughters of charity. They dug out the septic tank of St. Mary's mother and baby home, the hoarded rubble of fetuses and babies' bones laid to disordered rest. Others haggled overseas to more hallowed mothers. Bon sécure. This happened in the New Republic, independent from one rule lashed to another. A corner of our daily loop is pinned by the workhouse burial ground. She died of a fever and no one could save her. But they were buried under the soil and stars. Furs colonizes that field with its wildly blooming yellow sparks. And I'm going to move into the second half of the book, the Half a Crown, 6 poems, and I'll just read a couple of those. This one is called Lean To, and I'll tell you, we have donkeys. Harry mentioned the introduction, so because of that, we have a place to store their grub, all their hay and straw. Lean To. Hush of the hay shed, where slices of light limit the rain. It holds a thick quiet. I tell my partner, this is where I'll meditate, without candle or burning incense. What dung-bound scent could be more worthy to offer than this once field, folded into flakes, trussed with orange twine into bales stacked 3 high. Nourishing shelter you are, a soft grotto, a grassy shrine without distraction. The storm-fast river and jackdaws are unheard here. As children, when we played sardines, that backward hide and seek, I would choose a closet shelled with out-of-season wool. The light wept in under the door. It was safe as our held breath. If our seekers had been diverted, how long would we have kept our silence? And I'll read the closing poem here, which is, the title is Beltana, which is the Celtic season of summer. Rest my head on a sun-wrapped pillow tonight to coax an easy sleep. The fresh breeze does the drying when the air is still cool. Fixing pegs on the line requires so little movement. Blue tits pecking at the feeder aren't bothered. A birder says it's not that robins bear affection for us, but that we present no outright threat. Our harm filters to them through the slaughtered hedgerow, ridding their wild of food and shelter. What we take for beauty in their singing is a fierce claim, warning to enemies and rivals, not courting ballads. The pheasant's rusty shriek turns the lock of summer, not the cuckoo's come on of his name. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And the last group of poems, they're reading groups of poems, individual ones. So this is, these poems I started almost a year ago, about February 25th. These are all poems, responding to the invasion of Ukraine. And, I'll add now, because it comes up in the poems, is that we've been hosting a Ukrainian mother and her young child. The first poem in this is, this one I'm going to begin with. It's called Eastern Frost. The grass was milky this morning, lightly iced. Venus was bright before the sun in a vacant sky. just below freezing, and the morning chorus was hidden, heard, full-throated. The sky was adamant blue, no huff coming from a winter gust. I pruned hydrangeas, potted chives, parsley, tethered a pink rose to a stone wall. The afternoon was bright, dry enough to hang wash on the line. I shredded cabbage for white bean soup, set the table. Who is tending the gardens of Kharkiv? Are birds singing in Kiev? Another coming. Today's Angelus is a thin plonk, like the piano tuner's persistent playing of one black key. Reminder, it is said, this midday chime of the unexpected, where you might be scraping a carrot or reading a book, and some lambent angel materializes right there in front of you with a life-shattering pronouncement, like the invasion of a sovereign nation or the shelling of hospitals and sunflowers. Bethlehem is now. This next poem, it refers to, I have a quotation in it from a Ukrainian man named Alexei Nabilnikov. He was quoted in the New York Times on the 6th of March, 2022. And he had sent his family away, and he said, this separation is like falling into emptiness. Overhead, we wait for the oncoming, for the convoy east of Kiev to retreat like a turtle's head. I cannot look away from Alexei Nabilnikov, who has urged his wife and daughter to flee. This separation is like falling into emptiness. The sky over me this morning was a sort of empty, just magpie's midnight tail, nothing like missiles unleashed over Ukraine. On the radio, we were in the car, so the only time I listened to the radio, and they were interviewing a woman who had arrived into Ireland. This is going for just the first weeks after the invasion. And the title comes from a music theory mnemonic for the order of sharps. Fast cars go dangerously around every bend. I heard the woman on the radio, fresh from Ukraine, tell how she left with the city crashing around her. She sounds like this happened decades ago, I say. I heard her say, a helicopter fell in the key of C, and overnight we spent on the floor. What I heard is not what she said. A helicopter fell in the key of C. This morning, I listened to wind-scored music for cedar, ash, and beech. I couldn't tell the key. The limbs made a kind of singing, and leaves a sort of hymn. Retreat. Wrap me here in night, where slender shutters allow only a blink of dawn. Shelter me the way a mussel shell harbors its soft body. Armor me against the seeing time when nothing is the best I can do here, where only birds cross the sky and only catkins fall. Leave me in this lack of light where I'll be safe and the duvet's downy layers will spread their own sheen, numbing the irritant day, pearling the morning back to dream. And I'm going to read two more poems. And this is called, I think I'll just read the one. And you may have seen it. It's not the Ukrainian flag, but it's a crest It's often on a blue ground with either gold lines or white lines, and it's quite ancient in the story of Ukraine. Crest. See the trident, the gold lines on the field of blue. It is not of the sea, but sky, not a spear, but a bird that arrived with the Vikings, the gear falcon, drawn in thin lines, an abstraction of a bird. Body and wings descending, not rising. Trinity, not trident. Hard lines make a box of the bird, a vessel for breath. Box of wheat fields, box of sky. Box of flag, waving wheat and sky. Boxes of pine, when there was breath to bury each spirit for its singular breath. No boxes now, but bags, deflated like the bodies they barely cover. The sunken denimed legs still as logs. The breath vanished, the box is emptied. The bird, the bird, the bird. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, for that extraordinary reading. Your poetry is clear-eyed and optimistic, and it's compassionate and tender. You know, a couple of the early lines put the shine in every dark thing, and this year of grief isn't ending, but brightening, and that's what you've done. And you know, both of you have proved once again how great it is just to hear one person telling his or her story, and it's quiet and it's tender, and it's just you know, it's one of the greatest things that there can be. So I appreciate it. You're reading very much. We have about four minutes left. Why don't we bring David on, and both of you can just ask or answer a question. Maybe you've already said what you can, but one thing that I've been thinking about lately is what should we be talking about when we talk about poetry today? So let's start with Jamie and then David, and just take a minute or two, and maybe it's in your work and it's redundant, but here's Jamie.
What should we be talking about when we talk of poetry? I think,
Okay. Yeah, in our time.
In our time, it's, you know, I think the key is, it's, as you said, it's in our time. And I think, you know, I'm not the only poet who does this, but my poems are how I'm responding to the world. And often it's nature, often it's world events, but it's being present. I think that's most often I'm more present than ever when I'm writing a poem. And I think to be alive, we need to be present.
I think that's absolutely true, not only for a poet, but for an actor. And you mentioned something earlier. What I also like, I don't know if I mentioned, but your love of nature and also form. You know, your poetry, the way you ended the poem and then started it with the line you ended with the previous poem, that gives it a momentum and a continuity. And there's that in your poetry. So what would you like to say about what should we be talking about when we talk about poetry in our time, David?
Well, thank you, Harry. I want to thank Jamie too for that very moving reading. It really got to me. Thank you. I actually wrote about this. So let me just read the end of the poem. That the poem is called On the Cusp of Reason. And I just read the last lines. For all the words which fill our languages, for all the ways those words find order, for all the millennia passing, and the weight, reason and understanding still elude us, and the weight of obligation remains only to tell each other what we see.
I like that. You know, I always think poetry is one person speaking to another person and listening to the other person. And I think what both of you have said, it really has a deep resonance, at least for me. And well, it's really quite amazing that here's a woman from Ireland, and I appreciate you visiting the MPTF campus
That was
2 days ago. That's pretty amazing. And also it's great to hear and see David from Cambodia. If COVID hadn't happened, maybe we would never have this Zoom, but it has happened. Yeah. And so I'm grateful for both of you. And as I just underline it again, just the quietness and listening to one another, which both of you do. And you also see the world. You mentioned Ukraine, and Jamie, about maybe about 10 months ago, MPTF adopted a woman and her baby, actually a young child. And then her husband, who was in Ukraine, he eventually joined us. So they're living in a cottage here. So we all do what we can to help people who need help. So I appreciate that very much. And, thank you both very much for this wonderful reading. You've certainly lifted me up and opened up my eyes and made me realize once again, about love and death and how we remember those that we love. And so thank you again. And it's this time of the day when we're about ready to get up, but I just want to mention our next Tuesday's poetry reading. Next Tuesday, which is February 14th, is St. Valentine's Day. And we're going to have Phoebe McAdams, Corinne Conley, Helen Richmond, Kay Wiseman, Tony Sawyer, Jennifer Clymer, Larry Turman, James Cushing, Celeste Goyer, and Jeanette Clough will be on the show. So Jennifer Clymer, the show, thank you very much for directing the show. And all of us poets are very grateful to the MPTF for allowing us to put our poetry in this wonderful program. So thank you, Jennifer.
It is absolutely a pleasure. And it's been so great to hear from both of you today. Thank you so, so much. Yay. And I can't wait for next week. Happy Valentine's Day in advance, everybody.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, David. And thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.